They said I'm worth nothing, the black woman cried as the crowd of sneering townsfolk closed in around her in the dusty frontier square. But then the towering mountain man stepped from the shadows and declared, "You're priceless to me." The cruel faces surrounding her see only a burden to be cast aside, another freed slave destined for starvation or worse in the unforgiving wilderness. To them her fate is sealed. She'll be dead within the week. But this grieving giant, haunted by his own devastating losses, recognizes something the others cannot, a flicker of hidden strength behind her tears. What he doesn't know is that she carries secrets worth a fortune, knowledge that powerful men would kill for. And what she doesn't know is that her mysterious protector may be the key to unlocking a past that could change everything. Can two broken souls find redemption together? Or will the forces hunting them destroy any chance of escape? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The dust swirled around Mercy Thompson's worn boots as she stood in Dustville's main square. Sweat beaded on her dark skin despite the morning chill. Her fingers gripped a leather satchel close to her chest like a shield against the hostile stares. She had walked 300 miles for this moment. 300 miles of blistered feet and empty stomach. 300 miles of hope that somewhere, someone would see her worth. The first shop owner barely looked up from his ledger. "We don't hire your kind here." The second slammed his door before she could speak. By the third rejection, word had spread through the small frontier town like wildfire. A crowd began to gather. Faces appeared in windows. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. Clayton Morrison emerged from the largest building on the street. His boots clicked against the wooden walkway with the confidence of a man who owned half the territory. Gold watch chain gleamed across his vest. His cold eyes swept over Mercy like she was livestock at auction. "You lost, girl?" Mercy straightened her shoulders. "No, sir. I'm seeking honest work. I can read and write. I'm good with numbers." Laughter rippled through the growing crowd. Someone spat prayer whispered under starlight, all crumbling to dust. "Please," she whispered. "I just need a chance." "Chances are earned," Clayton declared, "and you haven't earned anything. Best you move along before sunset. My patience runs thin after dark." The crowd murmured agreement. Some nodded. Others crossed their arms and stared with undisguised contempt. Mercy's composure finally shattered. The tears came hot and fast. "They said I'm worth nothing," she cried, her voice breaking across the square. From the shadows beside the trading post, a giant figure stepped into the sunlight. Ezra McKinnon stood nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block a doorway. His beard was unkempt, his clothes worn from mountain living, but his dark eyes burned with something the townspeople rarely saw: compassion. "You're priceless to me," he said quietly. The square fell silent. Even Clayton seemed taken aback by the mountain man's sudden appearance. Ezra rarely came to town. When he did, he spoke to no one except the shopkeeper who sold him supplies. Clayton recovered quickly. "Stay out of this, McKinnon. This doesn't concern you." Ezra walked slowly across the square, each step deliberate, measured. When he reached Mercy's side, he gently placed one massive hand on her shoulder. "It concerns me now." Clayton's face darkened. "You can't be serious. You're going to harbor this worthless cargo. She'll rob you blind first chance she gets." "She won't." Ezra's voice carried the certainty of mountains, unchanging, unshakable. You're making a mistake, Clayton warned. A costly one. My mistakes to make. Ezra offered Mercy his arm. She hesitated for a heartbeat, searching his weathered face for signs of deception. Finding none, she accepted. They walked together toward his horse and supply wagon at the far end of the street. The crowd parted reluctantly. Whispers followed in their wake. Speculation, judgment, warnings about the path through pain. The wagon wheels creaked steadily over the rough trail. Behind them, Dustville shrank to a smudge against the horizon. Ahead rose the peaks where eagles soared and streams ran clear. Neither passenger nor driver spoke during the long journey, but both sensed that their lives had just changed forever, that some encounters reshape destinies in ways impossible to predict or prevent. The sun climbed higher as they left the flatlands behind and entered the realm of stone and sky, where Ezra McKinnon had chosen to heal his wounds. Soon they would reach the cabin, where two broken souls might discover that worthless and priceless were just words other people used, words that had nothing to do with truth. The cabin emerged from the pine trees like something carved from the mountain itself, solid logs weathered silver by countless storms. A stone chimney rose straight and true into the endless blue sky. Mercy had never seen anything so perfectly positioned between earth and heaven. Ezra helped her down from the wagon with surprising gentleness for such massive hands. She stood uncertainly in the clearing, still clutching her precious satchel. "You can sleep in the loft," he said. "It's warm. Safe. Safe." The word felt foreign after months of running, years of hiding, a lifetime of looking over her shoulder for the next threat. Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished but immaculately clean. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall. Simple wooden furniture filled the main room, everything built by hand with obvious care. Mercy noticed something else. No photographs, no personal items. Nothing that spoke of the life Ezra had lived before this self-imposed exile. She climbed the ladder to the loft while Ezra prepared a simple meal below. The space was larger than expected. A real bed with clean blankets. A small window facing west, toward peaks that scraped the clouds. For the first time in months, she felt her shoulders relax. They ate in comfortable silence as shadows lengthened across the clearing. Ezra asked no questions, made no demands. Simply offered food and shelter without expecting her story in return. Later, as she helped clear the dishes, Mercy accidentally knocked over a stack of papers near the fireplace. Crumbled. She looked at his weathered face, the genuine curiosity there, the complete absence of greed or calculation that she had grown accustomed to seeing in men's eyes. Slowly, she opened her leather satchel. The maps inside were works of art, hand-drawn with meticulous detail. Every creek bed marked, every geological formation noted, every potential mining site carefully documented. "I worked for Marcus Webb in Denver," she said quietly. "The territorial cartographer. For 2 years, I cleaned his office while he worked. Everyone assumed I was just another servant who couldn't read." She spread one of the maps on the table. Ezra leaned closer, his eyes widening at the incredible detail. Marcus was dying. Knew he didn't have long. Started teaching me to read the land. Showed me how water cuts through rock. How to identify mineral deposits. Where the real treasure lay hidden. Her voice grew stronger as the memories flowed. He said knowledge was the only wealth they couldn't steal from you. Made me memorize everything. Every survey, every claim, every secret the mountains held. Ezra studied the maps with growing amazement. These show areas I've never seen marked anywhere else. Because Marcus never filed them officially. Too dangerous. Too many powerful men who would kill for this information. She pointed to a section near Ezra's own property. See this tributary? Marcus found gold there 3 years ago. Rich deposits. But he died before he could file claims. Why didn't you use this knowledge before now? Mercy's laugh held no humor. Who would believe me? Who would let someone like me file mining claims? I needed someone with legal standing, someone the territorial office would accept. Understanding dawned in Ezra's eyes. Someone like me. I'm not asking for charity. This would be a partnership, equal shares. Your legal standing and mountain skills, my knowledge and maps. Ezra was quiet for a long moment. Outside, an owl called through the darkness. Wind sighed through the pines like the mountain itself was breathing. Finally, he nodded. When do we start? The next morning brought crystalline air and endless possibilities. They rode out at dawn with efficient. By evening, they had enough evidence to file legitimate claims. For the first time since leaving Denver, Mercy felt truly hopeful. Not just for survival, but for something more. Purpose. Partnership. A future built on her own terms. Ezra seemed different, too. The grief that had shadowed his features was lighter somehow, as if helping her had reminded him that life still held possibilities. Neither of them noticed the rider watching from the distant ridge. Clayton Morrison lowered his spyglass with a cold smile. He had suspected the mountain man's new guest was more than she appeared. Now he knew exactly how much more. 3 weeks later, their partnership had transformed into something neither had expected. Mercy and Ezra worked the claim with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized like dancers who had performed together for years. The gold was real. More than real. It was abundant. Each morning brought new discoveries. Nuggets the size of beans gleamed in their pans. Dust accumulated in carefully guarded pouches. Their modest operation was yielding more wealth than most men saw in a lifetime. Mercy's confidence bloomed alongside their success. She no longer flinched when strangers approached. Her voice carried authority when discussing geological formations with other miners. The frightened woman who had wept in Dustville's square seemed like a distant memory. Ezra watched her transformation with quiet pride. She reminded him of Sarah in unexpected moments. Not in appearance, but in the fierce intelligence that lit her eyes when she studied the maps. The gentle humor that emerged when she thought no one was looking. The grief that had consumed him for 3 years began to ease. Not disappearing entirely, but making room for something new. Purpose, family, hope. They filed claims on 3 separate sites using Mercy's memorized surveys. The territorial office accepted their paperwork without question. Ezra's reputation as an honest mountain man opened doors that would have remained forever closed to Mercy alone. We should expand operations, Mercy suggested one evening as they reviewed their growing accumulation of gold. Marcus mapped 7 more sites within riding distance. That means hiring help, more attention. It also means more security. Harder for anyone to drive us slowly. His massive frame cast a long shadow in the morning sun. You're trespassing, Morrison. This claim is legally filed and documented. Clayton smiled coldly. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. Actually, it's not. See, I've done some research on your partner here. Turns out she's still bound by certain legal obligations. Mercy's blood turned to ice water. She recognized the type of document even from a distance. A contract of service. The kind that bound freed slaves to former owners or their representatives. That's impossible, she said. I have my freedom papers. Freedom papers can be revoked under territorial law when debts remain unpaid. Clayton unfolded the document with theatrical precision. According to this, you owe substantial money to the estate of one Marcus Webb for room, board, and education services rendered. The lie was so perfectly crafted that Mercy almost admired its audacity. Marcus had never charged her anything, had in fact paid her small wages for cleaning his office. But proving that now, with Marcus dead and buried, would be nearly impossible. The document is fraudulent, Ezra said flatly. That's for the territorial court to decide. Until then, this woman and any assets she's accumulated belong to me as the estate's representative. One of Clayton's men stepped forward. His hand rested casually on his gun belt. Makes things simple. You can walk away clean, Mountain Man. No trouble for anyone. Ezra moved slightly, positioning himself between the men and Mercy. His own weapon remained holstered, but his stance suggested he could change that situation very quickly. She's under my protection. Your protection doesn't extend to legal matters. Clayton's smile widened. I have a court order giving me authority to collect on this debt. You interfere, you're breaking territorial law. Mercy's mind raced through options. All of them ended badly. Clayton had outmaneuvered them completely, used the system itself as a weapon. How much? She asked quietly. Beg your pardon? The debt that located them is. The maps. The surveys. All of it reverts to the estate I represent. Clayton folded the document carefully. You can keep whatever gold you've already extracted. I'm even willing to compensate you for your time and labor. Mercy felt the walls closing in. Everything she had built, every hope she had nurtured, all of it crumbling because the law saw her as property rather than person. Then Ezra spoke. His voice carried the quiet finality of an avalanche. No. Clayton blinked. I beg your pardon? I said no. The claims stay ours. The woman stays under my protection. You and your fake papers can ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of. The two hired men tensed, hands drifted toward weapons. The clearing suddenly felt charged with violence. Clayton held up a restraining hand. His smile never wavered. This isn't over, McKinnon. The law will have its due, one way or another. They mounted up and rode away, leaving dust and implied threats hanging in the mountain air. Mercy stared after them with growing despair. He'll be back. With more men, official backing. Ezra was already moving toward the cabin. Then we'd better not be here when he returns. They packed in darkness. Essential supplies only, gold hidden in flour sacks and coffee tins. Mercy's precious maps wrapped in oiled cloth against her body. By dawn, they were ghosts, leaving only cold ashes and an empty cabin behind. Ezra guided them deeper into the mountains along trails known only to trappers and deer. The terrain grew rougher with each mile, rocky switchbacks that tested even their sure-footed horses, creek crossings where one false step meant a fatal fall. Behind them, dust clouds marked Clayton's pursuit. He had returned with 6 men and a territorial marshal. The fraudulent papers carried official seals now, legitimacy purchased with gold and political influence. They're gaining, Mercy observed, glancing back at the distant riders. Let them try to follow where we're going. Ezra led them up a narrow canyon that seemed to dead end against sheer cliff walls. But he knew a hidden path that wound behind a waterfall. They emerged on a hot. They descended into a hidden valley, where smoke rose from scattered cabins. A community of people who had found refuge in the mountains for various reasons. freed slaves who had escaped bounty hunters, displaced native families driven from ancestral lands, white settlers fleeing debts or failed marriages, all bound together by the simple need to survive. Elder Martha Washington emerged from the largest cabin as they approached. Her hair was white as fresh snow, but her eyes held the sharpness of someone who had seen everything life could offer. She studied Mercy with particular intensity. "You have the look of someone I used to know," Martha said slowly. "Ma'am?" "Features. Bone structure. Reminds me of a woman I met years ago. Beautiful lady, with sad eyes. Had to give up her child to keep it safe." Mercy's pulse quickened. She had always wondered about her origins. Her earliest memories were of an orphanage in St. Louis. No family, no history, no connection to anything or anyone. What was her name? Victoria. Victoria Blackwood. Richest woman in 3 territories. Lost track of her after she moved west, but heard she was still searching for that lost daughter. The name meant nothing to Mercy, but something stirred in her memory. A lullaby half remembered. A woman's voice singing softly in a language she couldn't identify. Martha invited them inside, where the community's unofficial leaders had gathered. The story of Clayton's pursuit spread quickly. These people understood persecution, recognized the signs of systematic oppression dressed up as legal authority. "Victoria Blackwood owns land from here to the Colorado border," said Thomas Running Bear, a displaced Cheyenne scout. "If she's really your mother, she has power to challenge any territorial court." "Big if," Mercy replied. "Could be coincidence. Similar features don't prove family connection." But Martha was studying her face with growing certainty. "You have her hands. Same long fingers, same way of holding your head when you think, and that birthmark behind your left ear." Mercy's hand flew instinctively to the small, crescent-shaped mark she had always tried to hide. "How could you possibly know about that?" "Because I helped years ago. Baby's room. Never changed anything." Mercy's vision blurred. The possibility of family, of belonging, of a mother who had never stopped searching. It seemed too miraculous to believe. "Even if it's true," she said carefully, "how do we reach her? Clayton's men are probably watching every trail." "Not every trail," Thomas smiled. "Some paths only we know. Deer tracks and game trails your pursuers would never think to follow." Elder Martha took Mercy's hands in her weathered ones. The gesture felt familiar in ways that defied explanation. "Child, I've been praying for this day since the moment that baby disappeared. If you're willing to take the risk, I can get word to Victoria. Let her know her daughter might have finally come home." Outside, wind howled through the pines like voices of the ancestors calling across time. Mercy felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She could remain hidden in this mountain community, safe but always running, always looking over her shoulder. Or she could trust in the possibility of family, of a mother's love, of power enough to stand against men like Clayton Morrison. Ezra watched her internal struggle with quiet understanding. Whatever she decided, he would support. The strange partnership that had begun with his simple declaration of her worth had grown into something deeper, something worth fighting for. Mercy squeezed Martha's hands and made her choice. Thomas Running Bear led them through paths that existed more in memory than reality. Ancient game trails that wound between towering peaks and hidden valleys. Places where his ancestors had hunted elk before the first white settlers crossed the Mississippi. Mercy rode in silence, her mind churning with possibilities and fears. The thought of meeting Victoria Blackwood filled her with equal measures of hope and terror. What if Martha was wrong? What if the resemblance was mere coincidence? What if Victoria rejected her as an impostor seeking wealth and position? Ezra seemed to sense her turmoil. He rode close enough that their horses nearly touched. His presence was steady as granite, unshakable. They traveled for 2 days through country so remote, cultivated fields. Workers looked up from their tasks with curious but not unfriendly faces. Many showed the weathered features of former slaves who had found sanctuary here. The house itself was magnificent. White columns supported a wraparound porch that could have hosted a small-town meeting. Windows gleamed like jewels in the afternoon sun. Everything spoke of power exercised with taste and restraint. A woman emerged from the front door as they approached. Mercy's breath caught in her throat. Even at 50 yards, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same bone structure Martha had recognized, the same graceful way of moving, the same intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Victoria Blackwood walked down the front steps with measured dignity, but Mercy caught the tremor in her hands. The way her composure threatened to crack with each step closer. They dismounted in the circular drive. Victoria stopped 10 feet away, her gaze fixed on Mercy's face with laser intensity. Neither woman spoke. The moment stretched like a bowstring drawn to breaking. Finally, Victoria's voice emerged as barely a whisper. "Show me the birthmark." Mercy's hands shook as she pulled back her hair. The small, crescent-shaped mark behind her left ear seemed to glow in the sunlight. Victoria's control shattered. She crossed the distance between them in 3 quick steps and pulled Mercy into an embrace that conveyed 20 years of grief and desperate hope. "My daughter, my precious daughter." They held each other while Ezra and Thomas respectfully looked away. Some moments were too sacred for witnesses. Inside the great house, Victoria led them to a sitting room filled with photographs and memories. Every surface told the story of a woman who had built an empire through sheer force of will. "I had to give you up," Victoria said, her voice steadier now but still fragile. "My first husband, Richard Blackwood, was a violent man. When he discovered I had been with another man before our marriage, he threatened to kill both you and me." She moved to the mantelpiece where a faded daguerreotype showed a younger woman holding an infant. "I arranged for you to be taken to safety in St. Louis, planned to retrieve you after Richard died. But by the time I was free, you had disappeared from the orphanage, where official-looking documents were neatly arranged. Fortunately, I have excellent lawyers and considerable influence with territorial officials. Clayton Morrison is about to discover that fraudulent contracts carry serious legal consequences." By evening, Victoria's network was in motion. Telegrams flew to Denver and beyond. Lawyers prepared legal briefs. A territorial judge who owed Victoria several favors agreed to hear their case immediately. "We return to Dustville tomorrow," Victoria announced over dinner. "Time to settle this matter properly." Mercy felt fear grip her stomach. He'll have men waiting. This could be dangerous. Danger is relative, my dear. I own more land than some eastern states, employ more people than most towns. Clayton Morrison is a gnat buzzing around an eagle. Ezra spoke for the first time in hours. "What about the mining claims? Even if we defeat Morrison, others will try to take what we've found." Victoria smiled with the confidence of someone accustomed to solving complex problems. "Simple solution. I'm prepared to offer you both full partnership in a new mining consortium, equal shares, legal protection, all the resources needed to develop those claims properly." "We couldn't accept such generosity," Mercy protested. "It's not generosity. It's family taking care of family." Victoria's eyes softened. I've spent 20 years building wealth with no one to share it with. No legacy to leave behind. Now I have a daughter, a future." She turned to include Ezra in her gaze, and the man who protected that daughter when she had nowhere else to turn. "You're part of this family now, whether you like it or not." The next morning brought a caravan that spoke of serious intent. Victoria's personal carriage led a procession that included her foreman, 6 ranch hands, and 2 lawyers from Denver. They were dressed for business, not battle, but the message was unmistakable. Power had arrived to settle accounts. As they rolled toward Dustville, Mercy felt a transformation she couldn't have imagined weeks ago. No longer the worthless outcast begging for scraps. Now she was Victoria Blackwood's daughter, heir to an empire, riding toward a confrontation that would reshape the carriage door. Victoria owned more territory than he could travel in a week. Her political connections reached all the way to Washington. The carriage door opened. Victoria stepped down with the poise of a woman accustomed to commanding respect through presence alone. She wore a traveling dress of midnight blue silk that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. Diamonds glittered at her throat like captured starlight. Mercy emerged next, her transformation complete. Gone was the desperate woman who had begged for work in this very spot. In her place stood someone who moved with quiet authority, someone who belonged to power and wealth and influence. Ezra followed, his massive frame somehow more intimidating in the company of such refined strength. The mountain man had become a guardian of empire. The townspeople murmured among themselves. They remembered the scene from weeks before, the crying woman, the cruel laughter, the casual dismissal of human worth. Now that same woman stood beside the most powerful person in 3 territories. Clayton recovered his composure with visible effort. He straightened his vest and approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Blackwood, what an unexpected pleasure. To what do we owe this honor?" "Justice," Victoria replied simply. She gestured to one of her lawyers, a sharp-faced man from Denver who carried himself like someone comfortable destroying opponents in courtrooms. He unfolded documents with theatrical precision. "You are Clayton Morrison?" "I am." "You recently filed fraudulent contract documents claiming ownership of services performed by one Mercy Thompson." Clayton's smile wavered. "Nothing fraudulent about it, all perfectly legal, filed through proper territorial channels, using forged signatures from a deceased man who left no such debts in his actual estate records." The lawyer's voice carried across the silent street like a bell tolling. Every word was carefully chosen for maximum impact. Every pause calculated to let the implications sink in. Marcus Webb's estate was properly probated in Denver 6 months ago. No outstanding debts, no service contract, and defenseless women. Facing down Victoria Blackwood's legal army was an entirely different proposition. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "you attempted to seize mining claims legally filed and documented by Mr. Ezra McKinnon, claims that now fall under the protection of the Blackwood Mining Consortium." Victoria stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Mr. Morrison, you have a choice. Publicly apologize for your actions and leave this territory permanently. Or face criminal prosecution for fraud, attempted theft, and conspiracy. You can't force me off my own land." "Actually, I can." Victoria's smile was sharp as winter ice. "Your mortgage payments are 3 months behind. The bank holding your note is owned by one of my subsidiary companies. Foreclosure papers were filed this morning." Clayton's world crumbled in real time. The color drained from his face. His swagger disappeared like morning mist. Everything he had built through intimidation and illegal schemes was collapsing around him. "This isn't over," he said weakly. "Yes," Victoria replied. "It is." The territorial judge arrived within the hour, a portly man who clearly knew which side his bread was buttered on. The hearing was conducted right there in the street with the entire town as witnesses. Evidence was presented, documents authenticated. Clayton's fraudulent claims were officially dismissed with prejudice. More importantly, Mercy's legal status was confirmed beyond any future challenge. She was a free woman of sound mind and legal standing, partner in a legitimate mining operation, heir to the Blackwood Empire. Clayton and his men rode out of town that afternoon with nothing but the clothes on their backs. No one waved goodbye. No one seemed sorry to see them go. As evening shadows lengthened across Dustville, a celebration began in the very square where Mercy had once been humiliated. The same townspeople who had laughed at her tears now raised toasts to her success. She felt no particular satisfaction in their about-face. People revealed their true character when they thought it was safe to do so. She would remember that lesson. Victoria stood beside her daughter, watching the festivities. 20 years of 100 people. Former slaves worked alongside displaced native families and struggling white settlers, all treated with equal dignity, all paid fair wages, all given opportunities to prove their worth through honest labor. Mercy stood on the porch of her mother's house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Ezra was teaching some of the younger workers to read geological surveys. Victoria was inside, planning their next expansion. She thought about that terrible day in Dustville's square. The tears, the desperation, the moment when she truly believed she was worth nothing to anyone. Now she knew better. Worth wasn't determined by other people's prejudices or fears. It came from within. From the strength to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. From the courage to accept help when it was offered. From the wisdom to help others find their own value. The woman who had once cried about being worthless had discovered something infinitely more precious than gold. She had found family, purpose, a future built on dignity rather than desperation. And in helping others discover their own worth, she had learned the most important lesson of all. Everyone was priceless to someone. Sometimes you just had to wait for the right someone to see it.